In this episode of NBA Sports Talk with Walter Strom III, we are going to continue in our discussion in the new NBA resting policy that the NBA announced this past week and how it's going to affect the league, its partners, and the fans. And we're starting right now. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to NBA Sports Talk with Walter Strong III. If you're new here and you want to talk NBA basketball and more from a fan's perspective, we welcome you to this episode. And if you are new, we want to encourage you to subscribe to the channel, click the alert notification button, and join the conversation in the live chat or in the comment section of each of our shows. And as we said before, we're going to continue in this discussion about the new NBA rest policy and how it's going to affect the league, the partners, and the fans this season. It's also known as the Players Participation Policy Rule. And so we're going to do a deep dive, a complete breakdown of what this new rule is, who it's affecting, what are the consequences if individuals or said teams begin to violate it, and ultimately, what are the benefits to each of the parties. So let's get into the content. Let's get into the discussion of this new policy. Well, first, what we want to do is we want to get a definition of what a star player is. Now, here's what Adam Silver said this past week in his press conference regarding the PPP rule. A star player is a player for over the last 3 years. They have either been selected as an NBA All-Star or they have been named to one of the All-NBA team's first or second or third team. This star player can also this season, if they end up making the All-Star game, they make the All-Star game this season, and in the 2023-2024 season, they would be designated as a star player. So this is who the rule is specifically talking about in terms of star players who are healthy and that should be playing and participating. Well, you say, well, what about the rest of the players in the league? Because this PPP rule is only targeting about anywhere from 49 to 50 players up to about 25 teams. What about the rest of the players? That's a great question. And that's why we're going to go into a more deeper dive. But let's touch on some of the player participation rule. Well, first thing we need to understand, a part of this rule is no more than one star player can be unavailable for a game that is scheduled to be played. Whether this game is a regular game that is not nationally televised, whether if this is a game that is regionally televised or a national TV game, no more than one player can be unavailable. So let's look at some teams. Let's look at the Phoenix Suns. For example, you have Kevin Durant, you have Devin Booker, you have the recent acquired Bradley Beal. These three individuals in particular have been named to the All-NBA team, whether first or second or third team, or they have been selected to the All-Star games in the last 3 years. Another example, this can be the Los Angeles Lakers with Anthony Davis or LeBron James. So if they are scheduled to play a game and Anthony Davis decides through communicating to the team doctors and the trainers that he is unfortunately unavailable to go, and the coach now has to make it known to the media and to the public, then he can end up missing that game. But guess what? Now LeBron James is unable to miss that game as well, according to this new PPP rule. So you can not have more than one player missing a game similar to what we've seen in the past. And this is not talking about players who are unhealthy or players that are injured. We're talking about players that are healthy. Players that are healthy. Let's continue on. The teams must ensure that the star player are available for national televised games, and also, guess what? For the in-season tournament. Teams in the past, for whatever their strategy was that they were in using to be able to keep players healthy. Let's take the example of the Los Angeles Clippers, like a Kawhi Leonard and a Paul George, where they have unfortunately had a history of being unavailable for national televised games or important games that were like the playoffs that we saw last year against the Phoenix Suns. One minute you're communicating to the media that these individuals have practiced, they seem ready to go for the next game, only to find out and to be announced that they're not available because they are dealing with some type of injury or they're dealing with some type of ailment. Well, guess what? Now players have to be available. Star players have to be available for the national televised game, and in particular now for this in-season tournament. Now you say, well, what about players that don't meet this criteria of being selected to the All NBA team and have not been named to the All Star in the last 3 seasons? What about someone like a Cade Cunningham from the Detroit Pistons? Would he be able to sit out and rest on a national televised game? Would he be able to do it? The answer is yes. Definitely, there are some concerns. There are some holes in this policy because at this time, Cade Cunningham is not considered a star player. However, if he ends up having the type of season where he ends up being selected to the All-Star game, the second half, now he can't just rest and sit back and miss a game. He can't do that now. And so, though there are some holes and some concerns about this rule, if you are a star player, let's take the Brooklyn Nets with Ben Simmons, who has at one point been selected to the All-Star game in the last 3 seasons. Well, he can't miss a national televised game, and he can't make himself unavailable for the in-season tournament. It's interesting to note you have players like Victor Wembanyama, who is a rookie and who's just started in the league. And San Antonio does have some national televised games, but he is not qualified as a star player. So this policy, this new NBA rest policy, definitely has some areas of concern that the league is going to have to deal with. But I just wanted to get into a definition in terms of who a star players are, and in terms of how this rule impacts these star players. All right, let's continue on. Teams must maintain a balance between the number one game absence for a star player and home games and road games, which a preference for those who are absent to happen in a home game. So what is this talking about? Let's take, for the example, this past season, the Golden State Warriors were playing the Indiana Pacers in a home game. In that game, all 3 star players played. Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green. All 3 players played along with the rest of the team. The Golden State Warriors lost that game. And so they had a road game, 48 hours playing against the Utah Jazz. This is what the Warriors did. None of the players were injured or suffering from an injury. Steve Kerr elected to rest Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green. Now you say, are the Golden State Warriors the only team that is doing this? No, the league has been seeing a consistent pattern where teams would cause their star players to play one game, and if either they win or they lose, if they felt like they were playing an inferior team or a team that was not at the level of competition, they would allow their star players to rest. And so what this is saying now, you can no longer do this, because if the league finds you doing this, you are going to get fined. Now you say, Walter, how is it possible that the Players Association allow this new rule, resting policy, to be passed? Why didn't they challenge this? Well, great question. The answer is this was not part of the collective bargaining agreement, which they just recently established in spring and ratified in the summer. This was something that was agreed amongst the owners, amongst the 30-team owners and Adam Silver in the NBA governor board of meetings, directors. This wasn't a collective bargaining agreement. And that is why players, the Players Association could not challenge this. They were consulted about it. They were consulted about it, and they were asked their feedback. But ultimately, the league put this in place, and now we see this new policy. It's interesting also, as before we move on, that Adam Silver talked about even in the formation of this new policy, an improvement of this new policy, which was started back in 2017, 2018, they consulted a lot of former retired players to get their thoughts about players that were healthy but were resting because they wanted to minimize the risk of being injured, minimize the risk of it affecting the rhythm and chemistry of the team. And it's interesting to note that former players simply said, like Michael Jordan, former players like a Karl Malone, John Stockton, which I'm just naming, they basically put their input and said, when we were playing back during David Stern's time, there was the desire to want to play 82 games because they did not want to miss games, because they didn't want it to risk missing games that could cause them to be injured. The mindset was the opposite compared to what we have today. And now we see the league now returning to putting this policy in place so that you don't see incidents like the Golden State Warriors that they did with the Utah Jazz and other teams. You don't see that anymore. So just wanted to add that caveat. All right. Well, we covered that. Boom. Hey, if you're just joining me here on NBA Sports Talk with Walter Strong III, do me a favor in the chat. Let me know who you are, where you're watching me from. Give me a hashtag Team Live in the chat. I want to say good evening to Washington Wizards #1 fan, Equip Institute, Florence Donald, who is watching this live. And if you are watching this and you have the ability, let us know in the chat where you're watching us from. Give us a hashtag Team Live in the chat. Let me know your initial thoughts about the player participation policy rule, aka the NBA resting rule. Are you in favor of it or are you not in favor? Let me know in the chat. Let's continue on. Another thing we need to understand about this new NBA player participation policy rule is teams must refrain from any long-term shutdowns or near shutdowns when a star player stops participating in games and plays of a materially reduced role in circumstances affecting the integrity of the game. Let's get into this. Tech troublemaker. Good evening, sir. Let's get into this. What does that mean? Well, in the past, what we've seen when a team is out of playoff contention and they have a star player, say Kevin Garnett. Many years ago, Kevin Garnett, his second stint around, was playing with the Minnesota Timberwolves. The GM was Kevin McHale. Since Kevin Garnett's last stint with the Timberwolves, there was a falling out between management and Kevin Garnett. What was that falling out with Kevin Garnett with Minnesota Timberwolves management and Kevin McHale? Kevin McHale felt that since the Timberwolves were eliminated from playoff contention, they wanted to rest Kevin Garnett and try to put themselves in position so that they could be in a better position for the NBA draft or the NBA draft lottery. Kevin Garnett was not in favor of this. As a star player, he wanted to compete. He wanted to continue to play. Well, as a result, there was a falling out. And ultimately, when Kevin Garnett finished his contract, he left the Minnesota Timberwolves and has since then has retired and has not been back. Now, this is not the only isolated situation that I'm talking about. You can see teams doing this when they see that they are eliminated from playoff contention and they want to make the NBA draft. When you see teams tanking, losing on purpose, the star player says, hey, why are you taking me out of the game? Well, this new rule says you can't do this anymore. You can't do this anymore. Your player, if they are healthy and they can contribute and play, fans are paying their monies. Their partners, their partnerships with DraftKings through sports betting and gambling are contributing. You can't do this anymore. And it's affecting the product of the league. They want to make sure that regular games in November towards the end of April and May still matter to fans, even if your team is eliminated from the playoffs. Or another way you would see this happen is when players had requested a trade request. Like right now, we have two players who have publicly went out and said, I want to trade from this team. Damian Lillard from the Portland Trail Blazers and James Harden from the Philadelphia 76ers. We've seen individuals in the past, like Kevin Durant, when he was with the Brooklyn Nets and said, I want to be traded. It's interesting that when Kevin Durant made that trade request, he still played. But there have been other teams that would have took the position that would have said, okay, Kevin, because we want to get the best deal for our team and we want to try to accommodate you and get you to the team you want, we are not going to play you. We're not going to play you. Give you another example. John Wall. John Wall, who's more of an aging player, but who still can play in the NBA. The Houston Rockets decided to pay this man, told him to stay home so that they could work on their younger talent. The NBA has been seeing this pattern. Not only has the NBA been seeing it, but the partners. And Adam Silver kept making emphasis of, in particular, two parties. The partnership, which is the sports betting, NBA draft, and others, because now people are doing sports betting. You look at it, it's DraftKings, not just football, but even in basketball. And now the league is getting ready to renegotiate a TV billion-dollar deal. TV billion-dollar deal with ESPN and Disney, or Turner Sports with TNT. The league is saying, no more. You can't do this anymore. And this is the reason why we're seeing this. Keep those thoughts coming in the chat because we get towards the end. I definitely want to pull up some of these comments. If you're just watching me, we're taking a complete deep dive into the new NBA resting policy, also known as the player participation policy rule. Let me know in the chat your thoughts. Are you for it or are you against it? Let's go on. Let's go on. Teams must ensure that healthy players are present and visible for fans. Now you say that's simple. They should be. Well, let me tell you a story, and I'm going to try to get some clips from this for do me some YouTube shorts. But let me tell you a story. My daughter, a couple of years ago, along with her dance company, they were given the opportunity to be able to be a part of a group dance opportunity during halftime at the Brooklyn Nets. And so you had multiple dance companies, and they brought these young people to audition so that they can be a part of these select groups of dancers. And she made it. We also had to pay for our tickets. We didn't get this for free. So she got in free, but me and my wife had to pay. So we're watching, and I'm like, okay, the Brooklyn Nets are going to be playing the New Orleans. I think at the time they were known as the New Orleans Hornets, not the Pelicans. And Anthony Davis was playing on the Hornets. Brooke Lopez was playing for the Nets and other players. Now they had through the history, through the season, they had some injuries here and there, but for the most part, they were available. But here's what I saw before the game: they were available. They were available, and they looked like they were going to play. But all of a sudden, when the game got ready to get tipped off, they came back out and they were in street clothes. And I'm going, that's odd. And as the game went on, they were in their street clothes, AKA street clothes. That's how Anthony Davis got his nickname this past season. And Brooke Lopez, who is now with the Milwaukee Bucks, playing. My point is this: the teams elected to shut them down, though they had practiced during the warm-ups, shut them down because they were eliminated from the playoffs. And so they were not made available to the fans to enjoy, who paid their hard-earned money. And now we have this rule that says no more, this can't be. People who are paying their hard-earned money, and I'm not a regular person who goes to a lot of NBA games. I'm not. But I do think of the season ticket holder who buys a bulk of tickets, who knows a LeBron James and the Los Angeles Lakers are coming to New York to play the Brooklyn Nets. And then the next night, it's going to be Steph Curry. And then the next night, it's going to be Kevin Durant. They're going to pay for those block of tickets, and you don't make them available? The league says, nah. It's not going to happen. So now the question becomes, before we get in terms of what are the ramifications, what are the exceptions that a player could be excused from this new player participation policy? Well, if a player is 35 years old, a player has played 34 regular season minutes or 1,000 career games in the regular season or playoff games, they can put in a written notice a week in advance to say, a week from now, this game, because this player has been dealing with some nagging injuries, we're submitting request for them to miss this game. So that's sort of the exception to this rule. But the question becomes, well, what if teams begin to abuse this and say, nah, we're just like the example I gave you with the Brooklyn Nets and the then New Orleans Hornets. What if they decide, no, we're not going to let them play? We're not going to let them play. Well, I want you to look into some of these fines. The first fine, if the Lakers come to Madison Square Garden, since Tech was just here in New York just a couple of months ago, and he wants to go to a Knicks game and he's expecting to see LeBron James, and the Lakers don't make him available, well, there's a fine of $100,000 for the first offense. The second offense is $250,000. Check this out. The next offense is $250,000 plus $1 million. For every offense, you're tacking on $1 million. Now, does the players pay this? No. This was not a collective bargain agreement within the Players Association. This was done with the league and its owners and its board of governors. And so the team pays these fines. It's going to be interesting to see if the teams are going to be willing to do this. And I dare say, with this new TV billion-dollar deal that they're trying to negotiate now with ESPN, with Turner Sports, and then you have the partnership of sports betting with DraftKings. Now, the league and its owners, these billionaire owners, are not going to be quick to be coughing up over $1 million for Julius Randle, who made the All-Star in the last 3 years. He's not. He's not going to do it. He's not going to do it. He's not. Is Jeannie Buss going to be willing to cough up $1 million and $1 million and a million 11, 1 million and 100,000 because of Anthony Davis? What about Steve Ballmer from the Los Angeles Clippers? I don't think so. Now, I may be in the minority. If I'm in the minority, let me know in the chat. Put those thoughts in. We're definitely going to go to the comment section. I just want to do a deep dive on these policies and see what's going to happen. And so, why is the league doing this? Let's just recap. The league is in the midst, or we're getting ready to get into a negotiation with a new $1 billion TV deal, in particular with ESPN and ABC and Turner Sports. And then you also have the sports betting now with with entities like DraftKings. NBA fantasy basketball is not as big as any NFL fantasy football, but the NBA sees the potential where they want to tap into that fantasy aspect of it and bring in income and revenue. And so I believe this is the reason why you're seeing this. But also the fans experience and the money. And now the simple fact that they're introducing this in-season tournament. This in-season tournament is designed to get fans more interested into the regular season, because what have we been hearing? Oh, the regular season doesn't matter. It just matters in April and May when super teams like the Lakers or the Miami Heat or the Brooklyn Nets can turn it on, because it matters more in the playoffs. You can win almost 55 to 60 games, and it doesn't matter. It's about, the playoffs. Adam Silver saying, nah. Board of governors and league owners are saying, nah, we can't. And you also have to keep in mind, and I say this with all respect, not being sensitive to the loss of thousands of lives that we saw, 10,000s of lives from this pandemic. Thousands upon thousands of people lost their lives because of this pandemic. But also, the NBA is still trying to recover from the shutdown of its league and the loss of revenue. And so you see these things starting to happen. And I dare say the NBA is not going to be the first. Even though we cover NBA, basketball, and more from a fan's perspective, start paying attention to other leagues like MLB and the NFL. Start paying attention and see if you don't see some of these same things starting to come into practice. I believe that's why we're seeing it happen. So, question of the day, and then we're going to get into some comments. If you're just joining me, we're talking about a deep dive, in-depth breakdown of the new NBA resting policy here on NBA Sports Talk with Walter Strong III. How is it going to affect the league, its partners, and its fans? Let me know in the chat. Give me your thoughts and feedback. Let me know where you're watching me from. Give me a hashtag Team Live in the chat, or if you're watching the replay, hashtag Team Replay in the comment section. So let's jump over to the comment section. Ted Troublemaker says, I agree with you. I agree. That's a first. Oh, man. Newsflash. No, I'm just kidding. I agree with that rule. Fans pay big bucks and invest a whole lot of time, and they should be able to see their team, their fabs, see their favorites, I guess, favorite teams. Gotcha. It's also as interesting, depending on the type of employer you work for, tech, or type of employer. Those of you who are listening online who you work for, sometimes your employer, through a community relationship, may have some type of partnership agreement with a NBA team where they give free tickets out based on your performance as an employee, and how you've performed over the last 6 months to a year. You would be excited to find out that you and about 10 other employees are going to be able to go to a basketball game and to watch let's say I think Tech, you are in, I believe, what, in let me know in the chat exactly where you're from, but I'm just going to take a guess and let's say you're from Charlotte. Correct me if I'm wrong. And you find out that Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors are coming to play, and you just got awarded, you and along with some other employees. Well, history. Steph Curry played for Davidson, and he lived in the Charlotte area. So there's an excitement there. Plus, you're going to get some free food. You're going to be able to eat some hamburgers. You're going to be able to eat some chicken. You're going to have your little beverage, and you're going to be able to watch the game in the Diamond Suite, which I experienced at a baseball game. And then you find out when he gets there, Steve Kerr decides, no, we're shutting Steph Curry down. Where Draymond Green's not playing and Klay Thompson's not available. You're going to be like, yeah, I appreciate the experience of being able to come to a game because ticket prices were so high, but you were really looking forward to seeing your Hornets and the Warriors play. And too many times this has been happening. Let's go on. Our dear Florence says, even if the team is eliminated from the playoffs, fans still show up. Yes, they do, 4 games. Those fans want to see players competing. Exactly. You know, for the first time in a long time, though I am a Detroit Pistons fan, living here in Long Island, New York, I've watched for the many years how the suffering New York Knicks fans were coming to games to watch the Knicks play. And they didn't have a team that was competing in the playoffs. Some fans were begging for James Dolan to sell the team, and he wouldn't. But the fans kept coming. And fans deserve, if they're paying, that type of money, to be able to come. Now, it's a whole nother subject regarding fan behavior where you think you can throw some beer on somebody or spit at them. That's a player. That's for another topic or subject, but you get my point. Tech says, but if players need a rest for a crucial game, but if players need a rest for more crucial games, that's a great point, Tech. And here is my rebuttal to this. And if you're just watching me, we're watching here on NBA Sports Talk with Walter Strong III. We're taking a deep dive into this new NBA rest policy, the player participation policy rule. Let me know where you're watching me from. Give me a hashtag Team Live in the chat. Join the conversation and give me your thoughts about this rule. Here's what I want to say about this, Tech. And make sure I got my train of thought here. I was recently watching on YouTube a video by Walter Bond, who is a motivational speaker who puts a lot of motivational videos out on helping, and he particularly does a lot of motivational speaking for corporate America 500 companies, different things. To get him to come to an event to speak to your employees, you're paying anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000. He's that type of motivational speaker. But this in particular video, he was talking about how sometimes we as people think it doesn't take all of that to be successful. So he gives this an example when he was playing in the NBA league, because he was a former NBA player. He was an undrafted player who was not drafted by a team, but he was drafted by the Dallas Mavericks, and he had the opportunity of playing with the Utah Jazz. And at that time, his teammates were John Stockton and Karl Malone. Here's what he talks about in the video, and I'll try to be brief, but I want you to hear my point here. He talked about John Stockton. John Stockton was the type of player who played for almost close to 20 seasons in the league. You know how many seasons Walter Bond played? 3. He only played 3. He was a shooting guard where John Stockton was the point guard. Karl Malone played close to 20 seasons. You know how many seasons Walter Bond played? 3. Here's his point. He said, John Stockton, in keeping up his health and being able to play 80 to 82 games, he would go see a chiropractor at least 4 times out of a week. He would see them 4 times out of a week to keep his body in the proper shape. When Walter Bond saw this, you know what his response was? Man, it don't take all of that. I don't have to go see a chiropractor. I don't need to do all that. When it came to Karl Malone was the type of person when he wanted to eat, say, grilled chicken. You know how grilled chicken, you put it on the grill and it has those grill marks. Karl Malone was the type of person where he didn't want the grill marks on the chicken. His thought process was those grill marks could contribute in some way to a person getting cancer. So his request was that he wanted his chicken grilled. He just didn't want the grill marks on the chicken. Walter Bond's thought was, wait a minute, you want the people to levitate the chicken on the grill and not get the marks? He said he thought Karl Malone was one of the most annoying people that he had ever come to know and most annoying teammate. He felt it didn't take all of that. But guess how many seasons Karl Malone played? 20 seasons. Walter Bond played 3. Here's my point. Yes, players get a chance. At times, they do need to rest their bodies and maintain their health. But they must be committed to putting on a product and a performance, not just to honor their contract, but for their fans. And unfortunately, in today's game, we have too many Walter Bonds. We have too many Walter Bonds playing in the league. They want the bag. They want to have a multi-million-dollar contract. But they say, it don't take all of that. You don't believe me? John Morant. Should I keep going? How about Kyrie Irving? Should I keep going? James Harden. We got too many Walter Bonds in today's league. Let's move on. Hey, we're talking about today's new NBA resting policy, the PPP rule that the NBA has enforced here on NBA Sports Talk with Walter Strong III. Continue on, just checking out the chat. Okay, cool. Let me go back to the bottom. If I got this one already. Okay, cool. And we got one more. I get this one. Okay, we got that one. So keep those comments coming in the chat. And my thoughts on, like I said, on this new player participation policy rule, it's a work in progress because you're kind of gearing this to just 25 teams. What about the other 5 teams? You're gearing this to only 50 players, star players. What about the other 400? And so, though I'm grateful there is a starting point here, there's definitely going to have to be some adjusting throughout the year. As individuals are named to the NBA All-Star for the first time and have not been stars, there's going to be some adjustments here. They have to. Because, again, it goes back. I like the way Kendrick Perkins said it on ESPN. When you start messing with the lettuce, when you start messing with the money, you're going to have a problem. And the TV deals with ESPN, the TV deals with Turner Sports, the partnerships with DraftKings. If you even look at an NBA game, even on a regional or local level, you're going to see some type of advertising from their partners. And the time has come, especially when you see what players are being paid, the time has come where the league is saying, you got to stop messing with the lettuce. You got to stop affecting the bottom line, especially when these are healthy players. And so we want to take this deep dive tonight about the NBA resting policy so that there is a clear understanding amongst us as fans who love to talk sports and more. And so we'd love to get your thoughts as it's been going in the chat. But if you've been watching the replay up to this point, make sure your comments are in the comment section so we can continue this conversation here on NBA Sports Talk. And so as we bring this train into the station, I want to encourage you to check out this previous episode where we just got into the discussion of the NBA rest policy, of the announcement, and in terms of, players who are former players, their mentality towards it and more. And if you haven't had an opportunity yet to look at some of the top 10 best power forwards or centers or point guards or shooting guards, make sure you check out some of our previous episodes. And we will see you on the next episode of NBA Sports Talk with Walter Strong III. Good night, everyone.